Hi, I'm Beth Wenzel, a project manager at the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, and I'm here to share some updates about the Burnham Canal Wetland Restoration Project. This project is funded by US EPA through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and is being implemented by MMSD in collaboration with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. This aerial photo shows part of the city of Milwaukee and the three major rivers that come together before flowing into Lake Michigan. So from the north, we have the Milwaukee River. From the west, we have the Menominee River. And then from the south, we have the Kinnickinnic River come together and flow into the Milwaukee Harbor there. Much of this area was once covered by wetlands, but European settlers filled most of them to build the city, starting in the 1800s. Not only were the wetlands filled, but before environmental laws were passed in the latter part of the 1900s, a lot of untreated sewage and industrial waste was dumped into the rivers and canals. Some of that industrial contamination settled to the bottom of the rivers and remains there today, which has caused the Milwaukee estuary to be labeled as an area of concern. I'm not going to go into a lot of background about areas of concern, but there is more information about that on the MMSD website as well as the Waterway Restoration Partnership website, and I'll provide links to those sites later in this presentation. There's also a really nice short video that was put together by local historian John Gerda about the history of Milwaukee's waters and the area of concern. So I highly recommend that you watch that video. There is a link to that on our website as well. Anyway, nestled in here is Burnham Canal, which was once used for navigation, but is now a stagnant, contaminated channel with very little ecological or recreational value. And so the photo there over on this side is the canal, the photo taken from the west end looking east. So our plan is to convert that back to wetland and bring back a little bit of the landscape that was once here. So we have three primary objectives. First of all, so I mentioned the industrial contaminants that still remain in many of our waterways, and a lot of that contamination stuck onto silty soil particles and settled to the bottom of our waters, including Burnham Canal. And in order to protect fish and wildlife and ourselves from that contamination, we want to isolate them. And so one of the goals of this project is to cover those contaminated soils. So we've got, this contaminated sediment at the bottom, and we're placing a lot of sand and gravel, or granular fill as it's called in this diagram, on top of that. So after that, we'll allow some time for that to settle, and on top of that, we'll be building a wetland to improve habitat for fish and wildlife. And by habitat, I'm just referring to, providing good spaces for fish and wildlife to live or just to visit, as they're passing through on migrations. And then the final goal is just to improve recreational opportunities. Specifically, we're envisioning that this will become a really great place for paddling, exploring, fishing, and birding, or watching other wildlife. So the project will be completed in two primary phases. So phase one is partly filling the canal with sand and gravel to cover the contamination, as I showed in the previous slide. And then phase two will consist of building that aquatic and wetland habitat on top of that fill. So the phase one work west of the 11th Street Bridge, so here's 11th Street, the area over here, the phase one work has been completed, and that was completed by Miller Compressing Corporation. And then the phase one work east of the 11th Street Bridge over here is being completed right now. So that's currently underway, and that's the part that MMSD is doing. So that phase one work east of 11th Street, we've already completed some of the tasks. So we signed a construction contract with White Lake Dock and Dredge in January of this year. And one of the first things that they did is they installed a turbidity curtain and began monitoring turbidity downstream, or at the eastern, beyond the eastern edge of the project. And for those of you not familiar with that term, turbidity, it's really just a measure of how cloudy the water is. So we're monitoring that just to make sure that we aren't, causing a nuisance or other problem in the river outside of our project area. So after installing that turbidity curtain, the contractor installed sheet pile wall down at the eastern end of the project as well. So we've got the project area confined by sheet pile at the east end and also at the west end. So after that, they did a demonstration of their methods. One of the things that will be very important is to be able to place this material in very even layers so that we don't have that contaminated sediment just oozing out the bottom. So, before proceeding with, completing the entire project, we asked the contractor to provide a demonstration that they could in fact do this. So they did that demonstration, everything looked great, and then they proceeded to place the sand and gravel under the 11th Street Bridge in April and May of this year. And these are just a few photos of what that looks like, or what it looked like. So over in this photo, you can see we've got a stockpile of sand and gravel. There's a loader here that's loading it into a hopper that then is sending it by conveyor belt to load a barge that is in the canal. The reason we're needing to use that conveyor belt there is, a lot of these canal walls are very old and likely not very strong, and so we don't want to have very heavy equipment right adjacent to them, which could cause them to fail. And so we're just being cautious, keeping a distance from those walls. So filling this barge with the conveyor system, and then that barge is brought over to this barge where there's an excavator that's taking this material and putting it into another conveyor system that then delivers it to underneath the bridge. And the reason we need to do that is it's a very confined space underneath that bridge. And this photo just shows a close-up of that conveyor system loading the barge there. So our current activities include continuing to haul sand and gravel to the project site, and now the material has all been placed underneath the bridge. So we're now in the process of just placing the sand and the gravel all throughout the rest of the canal. And we're somewhat fortunate in this project that we don't have a lot of traffic, that we're adding to local streets as part of this project. This map over here shows the route that the contractor is using to get off of I-43, 94, and then onto local streets for really just a couple of blocks before they get to the project site. So, and this is just an image of what the operations look like now. As I mentioned, we no longer need that second conveyor system. Instead, the contractor is using an excavator to place this material bucket by bucket into the canal. And they have a GPS unit on the end of the bucket so that they can monitor exactly where each bucket load of sand and gravel is placed. And that's how they ensure that they're placing it in even layers across the entire canal. So they'll do they're doing a couple of 6-inch layers, and then they'll progress to doing layers that are about a foot thick, and then they'll ultimately, as they get more and more material down, they'll be able to place material as thick as 2 feet at a time. So our schedule, we anticipate completing the placement of all the sand and gravel in this eastern portion of the canal by October of this year. And then, as I mentioned, we'll leave a block of time to allow that material to settle and compress the contaminated sediments that are underneath. I know it might seem like a long gap between finishing that phase 1 work and continuing with phase 2, but we do expect it to take some time for those squishy sediments to compress. So after that, we'll begin during that phase, during that settlement time, we'll be, doing the final design of the wetland habitat. And that's going to be a time when we'll be inviting ideas and comments from the public through meetings and other engagement activities, because we're going to want to hear from you all about what you'd like to see here. We know that we'll have some open water areas, that are good for paddlers and fish that might be seeking deeper water. We anticipate having some habitat structures, some vegetation, both submerged and maybe some emergent vegetation, and some trees and shrubs. But we don't have, we're not locked into any final design at this time, and so it'll be a great opportunity to share your thoughts and ideas about how to create, the best amenity that we can here. So then we're hoping to be constructing that final wetland habitat project maybe around 2025, 2026. And then after that, we will begin our maintenance and monitoring phase to ensure that the project, performs as intended. I've got some contact information here. If you have any questions or concerns or comments, you're welcome to email me at any time at this address I've shown here. I've also included our website for the area of concern projects that MMSD is sponsoring. And so you'll find links to some general information about the area of concern program overall, as well as information about our projects. I've also included the contact information for Stacy Roan, and she is the contact person for this project at the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Finally, I encourage you to stay involved. The timetable for this project may seem long, but we do hope that you'll stick around and be ready to share ideas when we start discussing the wetland design. In the meantime, I invite you to explore other AOC projects through the Waterway Restoration Partnership, which I've shared a link to that website on the slide. You can sign up for email updates from the partnership or simply bookmark the page to check in as you like. And with that, I thank you for listening in and hope to hear from you. Bye-bye.